hi, everyone, in the Diocese of the Great Lakes. We're talking to Bishop Michael Hunn, and he is a good friend of mine. We had many overlapping tasks and duties in Chicago and elsewhere, and we've asked him about the work of a bishop and what a bishop's day is like.
So I'll talk a little bit about what a weekday is like, and I think that the image that keeps coming back to me is, if you know that old TV show, The West Wing, where like there are always multiple priorities going on at once, and you come in thinking my day is going to have these appointments and this is going to be the priorities, and by about 8:30, it's all been rearranged because some new thing came in or some new problem. And so the tricky thing is that every phone call or appointment that I have, that a bishop has, is something that is likely to influence that person or that congregation for the next decade. Because by the time they want to talk to me about it, they've already done everything they can think to do, and there's a need to kind of consult or get some guidance or advice or what have you. So it is literally like every phone call I pick up has the potential to impact that congregation or that person or that priest or that deacon or that warden and their congregation for a decade. So there's a weightiness to it, in the sense that there are no kind of pro forma anything. Everything is kind of intense. And it feels to me like it did when I was a college chaplain. And by the time a college student wanted to talk to the chaplain, something was important enough that they were going to talk to me about it, right? So there's this sense of holiness, in the sense that everything that we do kind of really matters, but there's also this sense that you could really fumble it badly at every moment. So the pressure is kind of intense, kind of all the way through, even in terms of like setting the agenda for the diocesan council meeting or something like that. Like that is about our values as a diocese and trying to navigate what is best to do. So I personally bike commute to work, so I get about an hour on the bike on my way in, and that helps sort of clear my head from my prayer time and some email time before I leave my house. I bike in. There's a shower here at the cathedral. I shower, and then I start the day. And depending on the week is structured in the sense that there's Tuesdays are kind of staff meeting and orienting. So I'm checking in from where I've been over the weekend. I'm checking in with all the staff members, and then we're sort of setting priorities for the future. We work in 90-day blocks. So every member of the staff and I have 90-day goals. 90 days is about long enough for us to be able to accomplish something meaningful, and it's short enough that we can redirect. Like 6 months out is too far. So 90 days is about as far as we can see before we need to redirect. And so on Tuesdays, we're checking in on how we're doing on those 90-day goals. We do our clergy call. I do a clergy call every other Tuesday to check in with the clergy, share with them what's going on diocesan-wide, and also then hear back from them. We have a little bit of a give and take. And then there's at the end of the Tuesday, the kind of my two canons to the ordinary, my executive assistant, and I kind of go deeper on what are the deeper things we need to be focused on, working on, etc. Then there are other days during the week that are mostly focused on in-person conversations. And then there are meetings with the diocesan chancellors, with the trustees, et cetera, to help work with property things, help work with legal things. That stuff may sound like it's administrative and paper pushing, but it's really not. When we are talking about whether this congregation that's a mission church is going to be able to afford to put a new roof on it or not, what we're really talking about is, will that church exist 10 years from now or not? And so when I'm talking with the chancellors about an issue that came up or a Title IV matter, those are situations where we are holding people's lives and the faith of the church's responsibility to do the right thing. So it's all discernment all the time. And it's all trying to listen and hear what are the needs of the church, what is God's will in the midst of this kind of going forward. So I'll just conclude by saying I try to maximize the amount of quality human time I do every day. So I spend as little time on email as possible. I think email is helpful for setting up appointments, but it is not at all helpful for problem solving. There's not enough human data in it. So we only try to use email to make an appointment to talk about stuff. And then I spend my time with as much human contact as possible. So if I can meet you in person, we'll do that. If I can't meet you in person, we're going to do a Zoom. If we can't do a Zoom, we might talk on the phone, like if I'm driving somewhere. But all of the time, I'm trying to not have the conversation over email. I'm trying to maximize the human contact because it's all spiritual discernment, all day, every day.
Yeah, two thoughts that strike me about that. One is I have always said administration is just the incarnational reality of life in community.
I like that. I like that. Yeah, yeah. It's like the platform. We all like the content on YouTube, but if the platform isn't there, you can't get anything. So,
yeah, exactly. The other thing that strikes me too is, and it relates to another question that we have, which is maximizing your human time. One of the things that became very clear in a survey that we did of our diocese is that, people want more time with the bishop. And we now have a very geographically large diocese as well. So it's interesting to hear you talk about the trying to maximize your human time. And what other things do you do to address that desire of Episcopalians to have time with their bishop?
So I've been a bishop now, just started my 8th year. And when I came in, I followed the pattern that I have always seen bishops do, which is Sunday visitations. And I did Sunday visitations for about 18 months before COVID hit. And by the time COVID hit, I was already frustrated with the Sunday visitation as a model because I felt like I wasn't really getting to know anybody. Like I would sometimes drive for 2 days to get to a place on a Saturday afternoon. I'd meet with the vestry and with the clergy, and then Sunday we'd do a couple of services, adult forum, meet with the confirmands, vestry meeting, potluck, and then I would drive home. But I would always drive out of a place feeling like, I don't even know that these people know me, and I don't really know the people. Like, what is it like to live here? So coming out of, and I've always said, I'm trying to be a bishop more like in the 1st century, where the bishop's primary role was as pastor and teacher. Administrative stuff was mostly handled by deacons and others. And so I still say I'm trying to do what St. Paul was doing. It's just that I've got an F-150 and an iPhone. But it's all the same stuff. I travel around and meet with people. When I'm not with you, I'm communicating not by epistle, but by Zoom or by phone or that kind of a thing. But the importance of the balance between traveling to be with you in person, not just for sacramental things, but for pastoral relationship things, that really mattered to me. And then we're now using the internet to do the podcast, the weekly update video on YouTube, as well as we do all of our council meetings, trustees meetings, et cetera, are all on Zoom. So that epistolary part is now how I look at the electronic communications piece. And the in-person part has really changed. So instead of visiting just on a Sunday, what I do now is our diocese is vast. It's the entire state of New Mexico and the far west part of Texas. It's about 152,000 square miles, 50 churches. And so it's 2 or 3 hours between each church and the next one, unless you're in a city. And so I have a tow-behind trailer, and I park in church parking lots, and I come to, we call them neighborhoods. I come to an area of the diocese for 8 to 10 days, and I park in your church parking lot, and I say, you may not have a Sunday visitation this time around, but I'm going to be with you for 2 days. So what do you want to do? And I've delivered Meals on Wheels with people. I've gone to the diner for the men's breakfast. I've just whatever the ministry is, I try to say to the wardens, somebody give me a tour of the county so I can get to know what's going on, where are the ranches, who's building what's changing, and then riding with the wardens in their vehicle as they're telling me the story of their place. We not only develop a personal relationship, but I really start to understand, and where we stop to eat matters and how we engage matters. I spend a long time with the clergy. Sometimes we go hiking or fishing, or we do what they do together. I bring my bicycle so I can bicycle the area, which helps me get to know the geography and the place. And now I feel like, having done this for a number of years, I know where to eat. I know where the people hang out. I know I can get around town without the GPS. And it's not just that I've been there for Sundays for 7 years. It's that I've stayed for a lengthier period of time. So I'm trying to increase the FaceTime pastoral teaching relationship. And then when I'm not with you for those couple of days, I'm communicating weekly with the podcast, with, doing teaching ministry, because I've taught confirmation class online myself, because so many of our small congregations don't have their own priest. And I was realizing that I would often show up for confirmation in a small place, and I would say, so tell me about your preparation and what questions do you have for me? And there'd be this kind of like wide-eyed look. And then somebody with great courage would say, well, we came here today, Bishop. And I realized, like, whatever I say in the next 30 minutes is all of the confirmation prep you are ever going to get. And so I thought, well, let's see if I can work as, with the teaching role. So we started off doing that on Zoom, and I did in the fall 5 or 6 sessions. And then in the spring, I'd do it again. That was fun, because then by the time I came to confirm you, we had already known each other for 5 or 6 sessions. Turned out, after doing that for 2 years, the schedule doesn't allow it anymore, and people weren't signing up in the same numbers as they did originally. So we're now trying to put those online as an evergreen thing. But again, the goal is, I'm trying to do what St. Paul did with the internet. And so how can I communicate in a way that's relational, that's 2 ways, so that people really understand that I'm here to be a teacher and pastor, not some, my biggest beef is that for the last 1,500 years or so, the bishop's office has become more and more a distant administrative function, like the governor. Like, you know who the governor is, but you don't know the governor. And that's not, like, why would you have that? No, like, that's not even helpful. But if we understand that the bishop is the person who is guarding the faith and caring for you and teaching the faith and supporting all the clergy, then, and you know who that person is, like really know them, that's what I'm after.
Yeah, that's what our folks would like, for sure, is that kind of connection. We read, about 30 of us in the diocese, lay people and ordained people, read John Zizulius's book, Eucharist Bishop Church. And
that's a powerful one.
Yeah, and saw in it a lot of the kinds of things that you're talking about, this desire for the bishop not to be a distant administrator. But
I think it's particularly critical now because, at least in this diocese, we don't have a lot of resources. Yeah. And the trust level between myself and the people needs to be really high, because we are facing difficult problems. 40% of the US-Mexico border is in our diocese, and half of us are Republican, half of us in the diocese are Democrat. To navigate stuff like border relations in this political context requires a high level of trust. And that's just one thing. In many of our places, we cannot afford full-time clergy anymore, and we can't afford to keep the buildings going that we've had for a long time. A generation of people that have supported and paid for the church their whole life, the kind of baby boomer crowd, are getting ready to hand the baton to the next generations that are coming. And those next generations are living very different lives in terms of their life of faith. So how do we navigate all of that? If all I am is a distant administrator and we have to sell a building, that's just mean. But
Yeah.
if we are in partnership together, discerning God's will together and making choices for the future of the church together, that how we make that decision together is at least as important as what we actually decide to do. So as I read the epistles every Sunday, I hear Paul doing what I'm trying to do, which is like, okay, I hear that there's a dispute among you, and let's, remember who we are and what we're about and work on it together. And, can you spare some money to help this, church over here that needs some help? If we are in relationship with each other, we can do the difficult work of being church today. But if all we are is an administrative structure, there's not enough trust for us to do the discernment work and to make the courageous decisions.
Yeah, that makes good sense. You've touched on this a little bit. Your biggest misconceptions about bishop and their work before you became a bishop?
Well, so I cheated. I was Bishop Michael Curry's canon for 13 years as bishop of North Carolina and as presiding bishop. So there wasn't much that I hadn't. The way I'd say it is, I'd been in all the rooms before. I was just seated in a different chair. And so for me, the hard part was, we'd be getting ready to gather for the meeting, whatever the meeting was, and then someone would go, "Well, Bishop, you want to open us in prayer?" And I go, "Oh, that's me. Okay, I'll say the prayer. Oh, got it. All right. Okay." So that has been the adjustment for me. But having worked with a number of canons to the ordinary and hired them to work at the diocesan level, I think the biggest shift is that if you are in the parish, your rhythm is basically the church calendar kind of rhythm. And so you know what Advent and Christmas are going to feel like. You have a sense of kind of how that goes. And no matter how big or small your congregation is, if you're a parochial parish priest, that rhythm is kind of the thing. And working with your relatively consistent population and neighborhood is kind of your context. The life and work of diocesan level ministry involves dipping in and out of the lives of people and communities in ways that have tremendous impact in that moment. And so there's a grace in terms of learning, how do I enter a system where I'm an outsider in some ways, and also I'm your bishop, so I'm not an outsider, but I am kind of an outsider. There's a graceful way of being welcomed into a place and also exiting that doesn't step on everybody's toes and take over, but also does bring the kind of support and authority that you needed when you asked me to come anyway, right? There's a dance there that a parish priest doesn't really do very often. And there's also a sense that I've watched bishops come into the House of Bishops and really struggle with the loss of the rhythms of the calendar year. Because in diocesan ministry, the rhythms are very different. And every time you go somewhere, that's confirmation. So you kind of do the same liturgy over and over and over again. And the seasons kind of come and go, and you rarely have the kind of intimacy that you had there. So I think they tell you in the College for Bishops that 85% of what a bishop does, a parish priest has never done. So there's a very steep learning curve if you haven't been working at the diocesan level, or if you've been at the diocesan level, but you haven't been like glued to the hip of the bishop for a long time.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. What do you think are the three most essential skills or qualities necessary for being a bishop?
I think the first one is you have to have a really deep faith in Jesus Christ and the resurrection, because there aren't a lot of trappings or supports that hold you up. And if you're not really standing on the faith, the house is built on sand. I mean, I get the sense, and I read the history books, and I think there were eras when being a bishop had a certain cachet to it and people respected what you say. I don't think that that's true anymore. There's much more of a sense of like, well, what would make you say that, bishop? And so I think that the authenticity of your faith is the most important thing. I would say the quality of your life of prayer is the second one, because what people, like I say, they don't need an administrator who is capable. They need a person of faith who shows up in the times when things are weird or different or shaky or scary, who actually believes in Jesus and is connected in prayer and is actually entering this meeting, whatever the meeting is, with a prayerful, discerning spirit. And then I would say the third thing is you gotta love the people and the place. Like, you cannot, I could not have been the canon to the ordinary for anybody, but somehow Michael Curry and I clicked, and I would go to the ends of the earth for him, and actually I did, and I'd do it again. So there has to be a love for the people, or else it's just too hard. And so I'm blessed that I'm serving the diocese where I was confirmed as a kid, where I grew up. I love the land here. I love the culture here. I love the people. And I love the people. I mean, sometimes people tease me because every church I go to, I tell them they're the best one, because they are. I love them that much everywhere, even when it's hard. The love for the people has got to be there. So even when it has to be tough love, if I have to sit with a clergy person who is in trouble or has done something that they shouldn't have done, or have a tough conversation with a congregation about closing the church, if I don't actually love them, then what am I even doing? So I would say you have to love the people and the place. It's not just, I want to be a bishop like anywhere. It's not about being a bishop. It's about loving the people, having the life of prayer, and having faith in God that's bigger than the challenges that we have right now. And I'm not saying that my faith is like that. I struggle with it, particularly now. It's a very uncertain time. We can't see the future and what should happen with the church. But I do trust that God cares and listens, and that God loves us.
Yeah. I think that again, we're back to incarnational. These people, this place in particular. Yeah, that makes sense. You've really discussed how bishops' work and role have changed over the years. You've already shared a bunch of that. Is there any other pieces of that you would like to share with us?
I would just say that I think the future has even more change involved. We have built a system that is in the canons that kind of really says you only need a bishop for confirmation, and it's got to be at least every 3 years. But all of that was built at a time when, I mean, we're still using like technology from the 1800s, right? We want to do a democratic process that involves everybody's voices. And we're literally using Robert's Rules of Order, which had in mind, like, we're all going to get on horses and ride to Philadelphia and have a meeting. Like, that's what it was about, right? Business doesn't work like that. The world doesn't work like that. We've now all got AI and all this stuff. So I think in the future, we need bishops who are more relational, who are more able to be present. Like, I noticed this with Michael Curry. I think he was the first presiding bishop who everybody felt was their presiding bishop. And the moment that happened, for me at least, was there was a time when there was a terrorist attack in France. I can't even remember the town, but somebody drove a truck up into a cafe and killed a bunch of people. And I was with Michael Curry. We were at some conference in some hotel. He was about to speak, and this had just happened. And he and I were standing outside the elevator before he went in to talk, and he said, "Well, I should say something, don't you think?" And I'm like, "Yeah, well, let's do something." And he goes, "Give me a minute." And he just prayed silently, and then he said, "Okay, turn on the phone." So I picked up my phone and I put it on him, and I hit record, and he spoke for about 25 seconds, and he talked about how this terrible thing had happened. And then he said, "Would you pray with me?" And he prayed the Lord's Prayer. And that was it. We put it on YouTube, and he went in to speak. For the next 2 years, everywhere we went, people would come up to him and say, "I prayed with you that day." They didn't say, "I saw you pray that day." They said, I prayed with you that day. And there was a sense in which the way he communicated that was as live across the screen as it was in person is the kind of thing that I think every bishop has to do today. Because it's not just when you're there every 3 years in the pulpit for 15 minutes preaching. People are looking for spiritual guidance and wisdom and counsel and conversation and back and forth with their bishops on a regular basis. And so we've modified the way we do conventions so that all the resolutions and the bishop's address come out in advance, and we have online meetings. So it's not just the delegates who participate, but everybody participates. I'm always trying to find ways to have two-way communication with people in the diocese, whether it's, in person because I'm parked in your church parking lot, or whether it's on Zoom because we do know each other and we can follow up in that sort of a way. But I think in the future, particularly when there are large parts of the Episcopal Church that will not have their own full-time resident priest, the bishop has to once again be the person who is the spiritual pastor that you are actually connected with, that you actually know, and who cares about you.
That makes a lot of sense, and again, resonates with the desires that we've heard from our folks. Absolutely.
That's good. Sometimes I think I'm crazy. So it's good to hear. It's good to hear that that there's some resonance. Yeah.
The responses that we got. We did a survey and got 535 responses.
Fabulous.
It was fabulous. And what was striking was how unified we are and what we're looking for.
That's cool.
It was.
Yeah, that's really good.
All right. Let's see. How has your practice of self-care changed from when you were a priest to now that you're a bishop? And if I can tack on another one, how is the best way for us to appropriately support our next bishop?
Wow, two great questions. So when it comes to self-care, I have always been a daily office person in terms of my prayer life. Like that is anchored, and I'm an associate of the Order of the Holy Cross. So I do my spiritual director is there. We connect by Zoom now on a monthly basis, and I go for an annual retreat for at least a week once a year. Those things have not changed, and they've been solid grounding for me. For me, part of my self-care is I need to be reading theology. I need time to think about that. And one of the hardest kinds of time for a bishop to find is the deep thinking time. Yeah. The bishop, if the bishop is like, if we're a big ocean liner, the bishop's job is to be up there on the deck looking out at the horizon. And if the bishop is not doing that, nobody else is doing that. So the bishop has to create time and space for that. And I need that personally, because the pace of this work is so that you can easily just get on a treadmill and solve problems all day long. But if you're not going up to the balcony like they teach us in those books and looking at what's going on and discerning with God, where are we going and what is that about? Then, so preserving that time is healthy for me. It's also necessary for the diocese. Other parts of self-care for me, I'm a dedicated cyclist, so I got to be on my bike, and I bike commute an hour each way into the office. It's the way I can get my exercise in, but it's also a way I can breathe the fresh air, and it's also a way to keep myself healthy, because the stress of this job, and everywhere you go, they give me sheet cake, which I love, but like you can eat nothing but bad stuff all the time in this job. So eating right, getting exercise in, having time for prayer, these are all the professional pieces and the vocational pieces. Time with family is really hard, and it really changes, because in a parish, often the whole family kind of went to church together and experienced that community together. If you are a bishop, now the bishop is traveling all around, but these days, I mean, I've got an 11-year-old, I've got 2 boys out of college, but we've got a middle schooler at home. She sings in the cathedral choir here, but I'm traveling around all the time. So occasionally there are these beautiful times, like if it's Christmas Eve she's in the choir. My wife is also a priest, and she may be doing a reading or something, and I'm, doing the bishop thing. So we might all be participating in the liturgy together that one time. But most of the time, my wife and daughter go to church and I go off somewhere else. So I'm on a different rotation than they are. So finding time for family and time that for my wife and I do Sabbath together. So Mondays are our day, and we hike together or cross country ski together, or sometimes we go see a movie or just have lunch. But having time with family, having time with my daughter is really important. And so one of the advantages actually of my going for a week to 10 days to camp in a part of the diocese is that then I might have 2 or 3 Sundays in a row where I'm home for the weekend and I can see her soccer games. And I can kind of be a dad in a way that a lot of bishops can't, because Saturday is a travel day to get to wherever they're going. And so all of your weekends are gone, which you're used to as a priest, except that your family was probably with you for at least a lot of that Sunday morning, and you probably weren't gone all Saturday all the time unless it was a wedding or a funeral, right? So it's just it's a very different rhythm, and you have to adjust your time with family and your exercise and all that other stuff. You got to get those things locked in, or else this job will eat them for lunch.
Right.
What was the second question? I can't remember.
How can we support our bishop?
I think by asking these kind of questions, for the standing committee and for the staff to follow up and say, you don't need to tell us everything about how you're taking care of yourself, but we want you to know that we want you to do that, and we want to encourage that, and it's in our interest that you do that. I think that the care needs to go both ways. Part of that care and the way you can support the bishop is understand that the bishop is not trying to hurt you. Sometimes there's this oppositional kind of like, you're not taking our stuff, don't come down here. I used to sometimes feel like I would go to a congregation and they could like lie to me for one day, and then I leave and they go, whoosh, now back to normal, but as we've gotten to know each other more, we can't lie to each other anymore, and the trust gets taller, and I feel the care from them as much as I hope they're feeling the care for me, But I think acknowledging that the bishop's job is hard, the role is difficult, and hopefully you've got a bishop who's collaborative and they're not just, dictating what the diocese should do for them, but they're really working with you. And if that is the case, then, listen to each other, understand that the bishop is probably not doing this to hurt you, but is trying to help, whatever it is, even if it's a difficult conversation, and also give feedback. I think this is really critical. Being a bishop, it is easy for people to just not tell you the real truth because they don't want to say it to you they don't want to say it to your face. And sometimes I don't even want to hear it because I've had enough today. But I try to create opportunities and avenues for people to give me real feedback, because at the end of the day, I'm here for you. The whole point of my being here is for you. I care that I'm doing this well for you. I don't want to it doesn't help me at all to send you a priest that you don't like. Like, that just means it's not going to work. It's going to be horrible. And I'm going to have to come back in a couple of years and try again. That doesn't help. Give me the feedback to do the right thing the first time with you. Then we're all happier and it's all fine. So that's where, tell me as early as you can that I'm off course, because that way I can correct it before it's disastrous. So have the courage to tell your bishop what you think. Mm-hmm. The last thing I'll say is your bishop is not really all that powerful. Bishop Curry told me that. He said, most people think the bishop's in charge of everything in the diocese. The reality is committees run most of it, and parishes run most of it, and congregations run the rest of it. And there's only 3 things a bishop actually has actual power to influence. I mean, you can influence a lot, but to actually make the decision, who gets ordained in the diocese, the bishop if the bishop doesn't say it, it doesn't happen. Who gets welcomed into the diocese and licensed in the diocese? The bishop. So congregational transitions, ordination, And then when there's a crisis, the bishop comes in. So how is a crisis handled? Who gets ordained? And the transition process. Those are the things that the bishop actually has authority over in a meaningful way. Allow that. That's where your bishop needs to take the lead. But don't expect that the bishop is going to be able to solve the Middle East peace process, or that the bishop's opinion is going to somehow sway Congress. Like, we're not that important, and we're doing the best we can. But sometimes I feel like, gosh, people think I got a lot more power than I actually do have.
Yeah, and that's part of the whole. Those kinds of ideas that you have all this power are what hinder the experience of working together on something.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because one of the beauties of our church is all the power is balanced out, right? The authority is distributed across the body, lay people and clergy, and the bishop partners with them on that, right? So the standing committee is the council of advice for the bishop, but they also have their vote on ordination processes and stuff like that. So our canons and our structure really encourage, if not force, us to work together. And I think that's beautiful. But then occasionally people want to say, well, the bishop should just fix that, but also fix it the way I want it done. Right. And that's where, like, it's better if we work together. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things I remember from being on the bishop staff in Chicago is the sheer number of people who had the opinion that the bishop wanted to close their parish.
Right? Why would the bishop want to do that? Like, I don't want that. That's like, coming in to mess up your stuff is the last thing I want to do. That doesn't help me at all. Like,
and that expectation builds walls.
Yeah, it does. Because then the posture's like this, and then we can't really talk about the problem, and maybe the information then isn't shared. Like, the roof leak's really bad. We really don't have the money to fix it. Like, that is part of what's real today. There's not enough money to maintain all the buildings that we have built. There's not enough clergy and money. There's enough clergy. There's not enough money to pay for full-time clergy in every place. And so we need to modify our expectations about what the future might be and build that church to the best of our ability. But my vision isn't enough. It's got to work for the people of God. So we have, your perspective and mine have to come together to prayerfully discern and then build together the church that God wants us to have. And it needs to work for everybody. So if we're in this defensive posture, then the information isn't shared and the trust isn't there. And what then happens is we kind of ignore the problem and it gets worse. And so then the building has more deferred and delayed maintenance. And if we have to sell it, it's now not worth anything. Like, it doesn't help any of us if we don't work together. So I would say everything we can do to build trust, to take the time to listen to one another, is what we really have to do, particularly now, because the days ahead are tough.
Yeah. That relates very much to the last question I want to ask you. As you're aware, we've had some Episcopal misconduct, and we had 2 bishops involved in misconduct cases. Folks want to know, how do we avoid that in the future?
Yeah.
And I certainly hear you talking about listening to each other and not being defensive and developing trust. I think that's important. I also think that one of the things you said that is really going to be, in some sense, news for a lot of our folks is the differing rhythm between a priest's life and a bishop's life. I think that's going to be insightful for a lot of our folks. But what else? What other thoughts do you have about how we avoid the whole mishigash we've been through?
Sure, yeah. And I'll start by saying it breaks my heart to know what you all have been through, because, I mean, I've read about it, right? I don't know from the inside, but I've read about it. And that should never happen. I wish that would never happen in any of our dioceses, because it does take at least as long to heal as it did to get into the mess. And so to me, the first place I would start is to say, do the healing for yourselves and be honest about the hurt and that pain. Therapy is helpful. Spiritual direction is helpful. And if there hasn't been a thoroughgoing process whereby you have had a chance to express that pain in a way that you know it is being heard, which isn't the same as being agreed with, right? People are going to have different visions. Part of the thing is we all experienced the trauma, but we experienced it differently based on where we were in the system and what happened. But to be able to talk about it is how we can be able to heal. And so I would say, first thing is, don't bury it. Recognize that the future, the first few years with your new bishop will involve some healing and some risk of trusting this one when we're not sure we should. It's scary, right? And so you're going to need somebody who has the courage to stand with you, knowing they're not trusted from the beginning, right? And with enough love and faith that I'm going to try to work with you on this, right? So that'd be the first thing. Recognize that the healing isn't over and that it's going to take some time, and that's okay. The new person hopefully will help you with the healing, right? The second thing is, I wish I could say that there is an ironclad way to prove there will never be misconduct again, right? And I've worked with a lot of congregations where the rector had misconduct or that kind of a thing. And the bottom line is, you can call somebody to be your next bishop who has never put a foot wrong in 30 years of ordained ministry, but the stress and the pressure of this job in this place at this time could crack them. Like it can happen. The trick is not to prevent it from happening. The trick is to be healthy as a system so that if there's something that bishop steps wrong, it's caught early and it's handled quickly. I think would be the healthy system, like the healthy body. The healthy body is not a body that never gets sick. The healthy body is a body that gets sick less often and less poorly. Like that's what we're going for. So we want to be a healthy diocesan system that breeds health for everybody. And I think, so that's the piece, is you can never completely rule out anything bad happening, but you can build a system that's healthy, that's transparent, that allows for communication, and both sides have a part to play in that. If the bishop gets the idea that you're going to give feedback and that they're expected to hear that feedback, that will change the system. So share the feedback. It's not just the bishop doing it to you. And then I'll say that the last thing that I'll say is that, there are background checks. We do handle all that stuff. And recognize that particularly if your bishop if they're coming from another diocese or they're coming from parish ministry to diocesan ministry, there's a learning curve here. They are drinking out of the fire hose. 85% of what they need to know how to do, they've never done before. So they're going to make mistakes. They're going to say it wrong. And if we can correct one another in love and understand there's a learning process there with some grace around it, then we can tackle the difficult stuff together. So I would say I've worked with a lot of congregations and some dioceses that have recovered in terms of healing. This diocese that I'm in right now, my predecessor did 8 years of wonderful healing, and there was still some healing that I have been working on. But the trust can be rebuilt, and it can be a beautiful thing. So don't give up on God. Remember, we believe in the forgiveness of sin. We believe that the Holy Spirit can heal. We got to walk that talk, which doesn't mean sweeping it under the rug. It doesn't mean forgive and forget. It means repentance. It means confession. It means amendment of life. And it means living together in God's new future. That's what we're called to do. So we just got to walk the talk of our faith.
Great. Bishop Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time and your thoughtfulness. And I know that we will be watching you and other bishops talk about their work and their visions and what it's like. And I'm convinced that will help us be better at having a good relationship with our next bishop. So thank you.
I'll be praying for you all night and day. Trusting God is all going to be well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Take care.